All right, hey traders, TG Watkins here. Let's see. Hopefully, we've got everything up and running. Looks like it's good on my side. So, yeah, let's get into it. We've got the market just kind of hanging around sideways for a little bit. Now, I gotta say, this is starting to look like it's doing okay. The market is hanging in there. It's doing okay with CPI. It's gone in there with we got PPI coming up. The dollar has been up. TNX has been up, and the market's doing okay. So. I think that there's some strength out there. We've also been seeing a fair amount of earnings that have been popping to the upside. So, it does seem like there's some strength coming in there. Now, we did also get some economic numbers. In fact, let me read this for you. So, the Empire State Manufacturing came out at negative 5.8 versus negative 19. So, that's a big change in the better way. It's still negative, but it's better than what the expectations was. And remember, the prior month was negative 32.9. So, big changes there. And then January retail sales was 3%, positive 3% versus a positive 1.7%. And the prior was negative 1.1. So, again, big changes there in the stronger direction. Now, the argument could be that seeing that these stronger economic data numbers are coming out, the market might be thinking, oh, well, the Fed might actually go higher on their interest rates. So that's one thing to kind of think about and consider is we need to be a little bit wary of that because a strong economy might say, okay, the Fed needs to keep raising rates. Okay, so that's just something to kind of keep in the back of our minds. The market doesn't seem to be too concerned about that, at least right this moment, because it does seem like it's doing all right, kind of, sticking through here. And as I said, we've been seeing a fair amount of names moving up, and we've been seeing quite a few names coming off the lows. And then also, as we kind of talked about, the dollar is moving up a bit. Now, the market, as I said, is holding in here. It's going sideways. It's doing okay. Even though the dollar is coming up. And so one thing I've been talking about, and over in the Moxie group, we've kind of discussed this, is that what if this dollar situation, even though it's up, it may really just kind of be a bounce and a downtrend. And that is something to kind of keep in mind because, if the market knows this, if the market knows that this is not, say, an up move, it's really a bounce and a downtrend, then this is just noise. And that is something to think about because if we look at this over here and let's say like right, in through this area, the last time that the dollar started to move down. And what we can see is it went down and at some point it got pretty oversold. You can see here it went outside of the 30 ATR. It just got really far away from the moving averages. And what did it do? Well, it went up, didn't it? But that was mostly like it was a bounce and a downtrend. And price went up, but then it flagged sideways and then it went down further. So what if this is the same situation? Because you can see that back here when price was going down, and mind you, this is on a weekly time frame, that when price came down here, it got outside of that third ATR and got away from the 8 EMA. Well, what did it do right here? Same thing. It got to the third ATR, it jumped off the 8 EMA, it was oversold. And so we could just simply be seeing a bounce and a downtrend to where this bounce right here back in years ago, I guess 2020, this bounced up into the underside of a downtrending weekly 21 EMA. And what are we kind of doing right here? We're coming up into the underside of the weekly 21 EMA. Now, those of you in the Moxie group, what do we see here? What is this area right in through here? That is the arch of the foot. And remember, oftentimes they talk about the elf shoe pattern as being a bullish pattern, but remember, it's still a pattern, and the idea is that it can fail, and we understand what that means when it fails. And you can see that leg, heel, arch of the foot, and where the ball of the foot should have been, it didn't hold, and so price kept going down. And remember, a double bottom only works when it works. Otherwise, it's a resting place until price moves lower. Same thing, that's the elf shoe situation. So what do we have here currently? Well, we have the leg, we have the heel, and we're right now doing the arch of the foot. So we as the Moxie group understand that price coming up into the arch of the foot means that at some point down the road, price is going to come back down to retest the low area, try and form the ball of the foot, and it's at that point that we need to figure out if price is going to hold or continue moving down. And maybe the market already knows this. Maybe the market already knows that this is just a bounce and a downtrend, because this was a bounce and a downtrend also. Maybe. So something to kind of keep in mind out there if people are looking at the dollar and being like, this doesn't make sense. Why is the dollar going up and the market's able to hold? Now, if we look at the TNX, that might be a little bit different of a situation. The TNX is bouncing off of pretty good support. This really is bouncing off of the monthly 10. This was mostly a flag, I would say, on the weekly chart. It pulled back from its high, but really it's kind of looking like a double bottoming through here, and now we're making higher highs. So that one we do need to keep an eye on and see where it's going to go. We need to figure out, is it going to make another leg up? Or what if it really is just going to kind of chill out for a while? So what if this, yes, it's coming to support, yes, it moved up a little bit, it's trying to find its equilibrium, and what if that's really kind of what we're dealing with? This is really just kind of some sideways action, and as long as that kind of stays contained, I think that the market's going to be okay with that too. So we're doing a little bit of detective work, trying to figure out where the market wants to, what the market's going to be paying attention to. And, previously it was paying attention to CPI and interest rates, but that seems to be kind of dwindling at this point. CPI came in higher than before, but it came in right in on expectation. And the market didn't really bat an eye. It was kind of like, oh, okay, fine. And, it's holding up. So I think we need to realize that, recognize that, and see the market for what it is and what it's doing, and just kind of go with that. So as I said, we've seen big names like Tesla, big stuff like this. I was looking to short this because at some point, it was getting really kind of overbought like that. I just about got right on the pullback. So you can see here, there's a little bit of a pullback, but now it's back up again. So this is why I talk about trying to short something in an uptrend can be real challenging, because trying to figure out the exact moment of when they're going to actually roll over and pull back can be a little bit tricky. So that's why we got out of this one like a 2% negative. And other than that, I'm just letting it go. I do think that eventually this thing will start to roll over and come back down and pull back, but clearly it's got a lot of strength and it's just not ready to do that yet. I do think that eventually it's making one of those 50, 200, 50 maneuvers, and I'd like to see when that happens, but we got to just kind of wait and give it its time. And then Apple, kind of looking at the same thing. It's getting pretty frothy up there, but we've seen before where Apple can definitely push for quite some time. However, you could see that when it did finally run out of steam, where did it go? Right back down to the daily 50. And so we're kind of dealing the same thing. You can see we've been having a pretty big move to the upside. And yes, it can keep going higher, but I think at some point we will probably see price come back down to the daily 50 at some point. Not sure when, not sure how, but I do think that's going to eventually be a thing, because the 50 is still below the 200. And so technically, based on these moving averages, this is not in an uptrend yet. It's still just a bounce or a move off the lows. And it's not until we really get a pullback or a test of support as a confirmation that the lows are in and price wants to go higher. Because basically what we're dealing with is we had this undercut and then we had a move up like that. And there's no confirmation yet. Like we're still dealing with, this daily 50 situation. So I'm kind of looking at that, watching that. We're also seeing that internally, breadth has been falling off. The number of stocks over their 20-day SMA has really dropped off. The number of stocks over their 50-day SMA has started to kind of come off a little bit. The 200 is still strong. So I like the market overall, but it's getting to a point where it's like, we need a bit of a rest or a break or a reset, something, whatever, because it's getting a little bit tough to want to chase some of these names. That being said, interesting to see that there are names like Roblox that are having good days because of their earnings. Now, I don't like to trade earnings because you never know which way they're going to go, but we've been seeing some of these are doing all right. And funny enough, check this out, 50, 200, 50 maneuver. So that pattern, there you go. It's there and it's working for you. And you can even see here that this worked. It bounced right off of the hourly 200. Moxie indicator couldn't give us any clues because this was just a news event, based on earnings. But there you go. So it's up to you if you want to be chasing something like this. I'm just going to have to wait until the next opportunity. But we saw that, and then Upstart also had move to the upside. And you could say this was almost the same situation. 50, 200, 50 maneuver. Not quite the 200 on the hourly chart, but same thing where it dropped into earnings and then shot up on earnings. So again, for me, not much I can really do about that. Just gonna have to wait and see if there's an opportunity after earnings for another catch on something like that. But good news, I mean, it's good to see that these things are working and moving up and coming off the lows and all that kind of stuff. And then Airbnb. This was another one that continued to just kind of run. In this case, it was a bit of a 50, 200, but it didn't quite hit the 50 down here. It really just bounced off of its 21. And this one did have a little bit of a lead up into earnings and then shot up on that. So that's another one that went up. Now compare that, interestingly, with Disney that was going up straight up into earnings. It was getting a little overbought leading up into earnings. Also shot up on earnings, but that happened to be a little bit too much. So this one was a little bit different, where it was up, 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 more up, and then pull back. Whereas Airbnb, look at this one, it did have the up, 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 but it pulled back into earnings and then shot up. So it was a little bit more structurally sound as far as pulling back before earnings. And so when it was able to go up, it looks as though this one is able to hang on to it a little bit longer. But again, I can't really chase these. Toro, same thing, just like Coyote and the Roadrunner. The Roadrunner always won. So chasing these is a little bit difficult and challenging. So seeing that. And again, you don't want to be running into a Disney. Like Disney jumped up and then fell back down. So just got to find your spot and see what you can do about those things. Other than that, we're trying to look around. There are some other names. FRSH. I've been kind of keeping an eye on this one and seeing what we can do. Same thing. Here you go. Here's another name that did move up on earnings. You can see right there, jumped up on earnings, but then faded. So some of these are kind of short-lived. Some are moving up. Just got to give them time. That even reminds me, like Meta. Look at Meta. So same thing. You don't really want to be chasing some of these things. Meta jumped up, but where'd it go? Nowhere. It really just kind of went sideways and then started to fade. Not terrible, but again, nothing you can really do about it. When some of these names just jump up too much, either you were already in it and you took advantage of it, or you had some sort of option strategy. But really, other than that, when these things get so vertical and so far out of their 30 TRs and off of the moving averages, there's just nothing you can do about them. So there was that. Was Netflix? Let me see what that one did. Netflix, kind of the same thing. Look what it had. It jumped up. Now, it had a little bit of room. It was able to run for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 or 5 days. But then after that initial run, it's really just been going sideways. So these are part of the things that we're seeing, that they're having their pops. Maybe there was a lot of short covering and beating expectations. And so, the shorts had to exit, or people bought based on that news or whatever, but the, value went up. But they're kind of reaching a point where, they just need to rest. And the market kind of seems to be doing the same thing. It seems to be resting. Now, there's an idea that I've been kind of toying with this week. I've been searching around, trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the market going to do? And, I know we're not supposed to be predicting the market, but I like to have an understanding of why the market might be doing something and where it could go. And in the next section, so when I come back to you guys in the Moxie room and in the options room, I'm going to go into detail a little bit further about this, talking about how there's a possibility that we could be seeing the SPY get up to about 440. That would be the SPX 4400. So Yeah, I'm going to be talking about that, showing that, and seeing. Of course, don't know if it's going to work, but I'll build my case, and we can kind of see if that's maybe something that's going to happen in a little bit. Either way, I'm looking for a refresher. Now, that refresher, as I've been trying to make pretty clear in the Moxie group, is either we do a pullback into support and it holds, or we really just flag until we continue to move up. So, as I said, in the options room, in the Moxie room, in about an hour from now, I'll be demonstrating that and seeing what we can do. All right, so yeah, anybody over in Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, feel free to drop a question. So let's see. Michael Monster, if we look at MNST, let's see. Daily squeeze, fired in Moxie still above zero. Do you think it would go to the upside? And do you think, okay, we'll look at PG in a second. So yeah, Monster, and it was kind of giving me a little bit of turbulence a little bit ago, but you can see I've drawn a line here, and I talked about this one, what feels like probably 3 weeks ago, and I said, yeah, I think Monster is actually going to keep going higher. If we look at the monthly and weekly time frames, they're looking pretty good. So again, Moxie Group, you guys can see this. We have price getting up over a downtrending monthly 10. That's the first move. And then what? We have a pullback into the monthly 10. You can see that was also a pullback into the weekly 50. You had the weekly 30 moving up, and then you had the 8 cross over the 21, and you had the Moxie indicator fire. So everything looked pretty good there. And then really it's just been flagging sideways. So I would say for all intents and purposes, yes, this looks good. It's just going to be a slower stock. And, on a higher time frame like this, it's just going to take time for it to move. But yes, I see it flagging into into an uptrending monthly 10. You can see here it was flagging, took a little bit of a dip, but stayed above the 21 EMA, and it's basically been following the weekly 8 EMA. I mean, that's looking good. It's looking all right. And if we look here, I'm trying to think where I mentioned this one. I'm trying to think, yeah, I forget where I mentioned it, but the higher time frames were looking okay. And then you can see here that the Moxie indicator was below zero, so this was all saying, hey, not quite ready yet, because that's an inverse trampoline move. Price should not be over the 50 if the Moxie indicator is below zero. And basically it was flagging sideways, and it came into the daily 50, went just below it, but that's a trampoline move because price was below the 50 and the Moxie indicator above zero. And so you give it enough time, flagging sideways, and now this thing is actually starting to look pretty good. Look here. You can see that price actually now bounced off of the daily 50. The Moxie indicator has now gone positive and stayed above zero, so that's all good. And we can see that we're starting to get some, let me draw that better, some positive divergence, and we have price starting to engage with these moving averages. So yeah, Michael, as long as this thing is starting to, work and kind of respect these moving averages, then yeah, they are looking like something that should be viable. So you just have to, if you like it, buy it, and then just keep confirming that this stuff works. And as long as earnings is okay, because it has that coming up, then yeah, it looks good. It looks like just a longer term, slower investment type stock. So let's see. What about PG? Will it go more to the downside? Let me look at the bigger picture. As far as the downside, this one I would be a little bit careful on the downside, mostly because it's possibly coming into the monthly 10 and the weekly 200, or sorry, the monthly 50, the weekly 200. So what might happen actually, and we'll just have to look at the lower time frames and confirm this if this is going to happen eventually, but there's a possibility this might actually be an inverse head and shoulders on the weekly time frame. So Michael, I would be careful with this one on the short side. I can't confirm it yet on the long side, but it's kind of at a point where yeah, I'd be careful with it. Yeah, let's look over here on the daily and hourly. Here's another reason why I'd be a little bit careful on the short side. You see how price went down, see how the Moxie indicator's been moving up. So there's no confirmation to go long, but it's saying to me that we need to be careful on the short side. So yeah, I would be cautious with that one. And you can see, every time it gets to the 30 ATR, it does tend to bounce. So you might just kind of be in no man's land with this one. If you were shorting it, the short was right there as the 50 crossed below the 200. Clearly the Moxie indicator was below zero this whole time, so that was an inverse trampoline move. and you could see that there was a giant gap between price and the daily 50 to where it did get to the 50. And unlike Monster, PG went down straight through the 50. Monster went sideways, dipped, and then got bought back up. So this one was a very good short for that. But at this point, it's probably run its course, and I would be cautious on the short side, but I can't be long yet. So there's your, middle of the road, something that's not quite doing either things. All right, let's look at Google. Let's see. So Edgar, hopefully, since you're in the Moxie group, you understand the 50-250 maneuver. So what do we have? 50-250 maneuver. And now we're just kind of waiting to see if this happens. Now, I remember we were in the Moxie group talking about this and saying, hey, maybe this is going to continue going short. At the time, that looked fine because you could see that price was continuing to get rejected by the underside of a downtrending 15-minute 50. Well, today might be changing that story. You can see here, it clearly started to move back up. And the interesting thing to note is if you look at the daily chart, and Nasir, and I was trying to think who else was talking about this as shorting it. Now that we can see this, a couple things to point out. Notice that the bodies of the candles on the daily chart have all closed above the daily 50. So that was one sign that this thing may not want to go lower. The other sign that this thing maybe was a little bit oversold was that there was a gap here between price and the daily 8 EMA, and it got sucked right back up there. Remember, nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the stock market. So yeah, that kind of moved back up. Again, I'd be cautious with this one. I think there's probably a transition period happening with this. I'm not sure that down anymore is the correct direction, but I can't quite confirm long yet. Although I would probably start biasing to the long side, especially since price could not get past the daily 50, and we're seeing this kind of reversal here. So do be careful with that one if you're on the short side. Let's see, Domo. Okay, I got it's got decent volume. Let's see, it's a cloud name. Let's say still working through basing process below D200. So let's go over here to the higher time frames. Yeah, you can see it's definitely still working its way through the basing process. It does look like it doesn't want to go much lower, and it's been reset. Talk about popping that bubble. And it does look like it's trying. So it is going to be one of the laggards, but does look like it is giving it the college try to try and get up and over. And on the daily chart, you can see right there that price came down and tested the daily 50, and it's trying to hold the hourly 200, moving up. Looks like it's got some volume coming into it. So yeah, I would definitely not be short, and something like this, you could be looking towards the long side. Just remember it's just not one of the leaders. So keep that in mind. And the typical thing, maybe we can get this back up to somewhere around the 200 and then it comes back down. But either way, yes, it does look like it is trying to hold the daily 50 as far as this goes. Yes, AC, that was you talking to me about Google. Stopped out on the short, which leads me to believe that dips are being bought and market goes higher. Yeah, AC, that's exactly what I was just saying. So yeah. And AC, if you just saw me a minute ago, I did want to show you. I didn't see this yesterday when we were talking about it, but you guys know how I talk about the off the 8, back to the 8 situation. Like here's a gap between price and the 8, and it wanted to come back to the 8. Well, look here. Didn't see this yesterday, but yeah, look at that gap between price and the 8 EMA. That was another indication that price was getting a little oversold, and that it wanted to, that at some point it was going to come back to that 8. So yeah, I just happened to miss that yesterday. I was too caught up with seeing the 15-minute time frame. So right here, yep, it was following the 15-minute 50 perfectly, and it was rolling over. But then, yep, there you go. It's changing. So yeah, and you could also see the daily chart, as I said, holding the bodies of the candles were all staying above the daily 50. So a couple things in there that I wasn't looking closely enough at yesterday, but now seeing with this move up, it's like, oh, yeah, there you go, pretty clear. So yeah, I think it does seem to me like the market is strong. As I said, the dollar's up, a couple of other things are up, CPI is up, and the market's not falling apart. So I do think we need to keep that in mind for things going forward. And that's why if we And when I get back to you guys in the Moxie room and we start into the options room, that there's a case for us to get up to 440. So I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to leave it there, and let's see if you guys are interested in the Moxie group and anything else I talk about. Come over here to Simpler Trading, and you can kind of find more information. $7 trial for 30 days, and we'll see you in the group. All right, guys. We'll catch you later, and in the Moxie.